Coming up in this video, I could see a hand standing out from behind the dresser toward the side of my room. Someone was concealing there. I hurried to my mother's room and locked the entryway behind. This video is all about horror stories and scary horror stories. It was a Friday night. I was pretty gaming for certain companions at my condo before going out to a bar. Around one of my companions brought me over. Also, we were all inebriated, chuckling. Furthermore, being clear with the run-of-the-mill inebriated talk. We got to the bar in no psyche that evening. Eventually in the night I requested a young lady's number who I'd been conversing with, and I went into my pocket to get my telephone. I understood I didn't have it on me. I checked all my pockets and affirmed this. I took a stab at following my means in the bar. Furthermore, inquired as to whether somebody turned in a telephone. I didn't recall even utilizing my telephone the entire time I'd been out. However, I ventured external the bar with one of my companions to utilize his telephone to call mine. Somebody got on the opposite end. I heard the playing of the telephone, yet they said nothing. I said, "Hello there, where'd you find this telephone?" Just breathing on the opposite end, I asked him, assuming that they were at the bar, yet they hung up on me. I checked out at my companion and had a go at calling. However, again went directly to voice message. I had a go at utilizing Find My iPhone, yet I had that element exchanged off for reasons unknown. This was a pretty sobering experience. It was impossible that I could have a great time realizing my telephone was taken. My companions to let me know, simply stress about it. Tomorrow go to the police station and get their assistance in following it. I returned home early that evening. I put several cuts of bread in the toaster oven before bed and tracked down my telephone on the kitchen counter. It didn't seem okay. I endorsed into it. Also, look at my new calls and be sure somebody acknowledged the call and endured. For 25 seconds somebody had been in my loft to acknowledge the call. That much was clear. I flipped the spot potential gain down, looking, shouting for whoever it was to emerge from where they were. Stowing away obviously has had a great deal to do with the fluid certainty from drinking such a lot of that evening. I had long last called the cops. However, it was not genuine to think about their confirmation of any constrained section, and places to stow away is essentially non-existent in this condo. They could do nothing other than a police report. Nothing appeared to be absent from my condo. However, falling asleep that late evening knowing somebody had been in my loft, or even more awful, I conceivably have still been in there with me, is presumably the most an awkward evening of my life. When I was more youthful, 9 years of age, at the time my mother had quite recently begun letting me remain at home alone. We had been watching my mother's companion's canine while they were on getaway. My mother worked weeknights, so she let me know if they would return around, since the canine's confine was right close to the secondary passage, and that I would need to give them access. I sat in the cave by the back entryway with the canine close by while I sat in front of the TV. He then began to snarl, bark while peering through the window to the bill. I attempted to see what he was yelping. However, it was excessively dull. I expected it was my mother's companion coming to get the canine. I went over to the entryway with the canine following me. Furthermore, turned on the porch light. I proved unable to see anybody out there at first. However, the canine was all the while yelping. I made a point to look at each edge of the yard. However, then, at that point, I saw somebody at the nursery by our shed. It seems to be my mother's companion. They appeared to be twisting around, picking something up. I expected she was respecting my mother's nursery or something legitimate. I then got an upsetting call. I focused on picking up the telephone as my mother was severe about me continuously replying the telephone. When I was home alone, I passed on the canine to bark by the entryway as I got the telephone, trusting it was my mother, and it was she informed me that her companion won't get the canine that evening as they wouldn't be returning home until past 12 p.m. They started to stammer, and the unadulterated awfulness precluded me from talking. Lucidly, I figured out how to proclaim that at last somebody was in our yard. My mother began shouting like a crazy person. She told me to get up to my room, lock the entryway, and stow away under the bed. While my mother called the police, I complied. Also, laid there peacefully for a decent 10 minutes until I got a thump at the entryway. I jumped up and out of the room, making it was mostly down the steps. I saw a face examining through the window of our front entryway, this face of a person gazing right at me. The face so disrupting that it upsets me considering it. Today I shouted at the person that the police were on their way. However, he didn't move. He demanded, simply gazing at me like a sculpture. I ran as far as possible back higher up, stopped 2 times and back to my room. I held up an additional couple of moments previously. One more thump came at the entryway, followed by muted. It was the TL commotion at police. This time checked the entirety premises. However, the person was gone. They took me into guardianship until my mother showed up at the station. After that occurrence, she begun having a sitter watch me again as far as possible until I was 12. Hi guys, before you keep watching the video, if you want to send a personal true horror story of yours, please send it to me on my email, and I will contact you for sure. Also, don't forget to keep watching your video. I was 16 years of age, and this occurred on a pre-fall night. My father and little sibling had gone to a Boy Scout setup camp. My father was one of the Scout aces. I was home alone with my mother for end of the week. She was at that point in bed. At this point, it was the beginning of the day. What's more, I was simply wrapping up my late evening gaming. I needed to go to the washroom once again before falling asleep. However, while sitting in the latrine, messing around on my telephone, I heard a slightest little tap on the restroom entryway. Mother, was that you, Mother? I shouted. It wasn't blustery or anything. There didn't appear to be any coherent method for excusing it. Gradually, furthermore, anxiously opened the entryway. Yet there was no one there anyway. My room entryway was presently closed. I was sure I hadn't closed. I headed toward my mother's room and told her that I thought someone was in my room. She didn't treat me in a serious way. It told me that she didn't have any idea what to let me know. I attempted to persuade me that perhaps I closed my entryway. I opened my entryway, feeling incredible, blew a gasket, and when I slipped a look into the room, I felt like my heart detonated within my chest. I could see a hand standing out from behind the dresser toward the side of my room. Someone was concealing there. I hurried to my mother's room and locked the entryway behind me. After discreetly blowing a gasket, telling her there's a man in the house, she at last trusted me and went directly to my telephone to call the police. I put my ear up against the way to attempt to hear anything happening outside. I in the end heard the man's strides emerge from my room and gradually come nearer to my mother's room until making it just external the entryway and halting. I could see the diagrams of his shoes through the base break of the entryway. He attempted the door handle, yet fortunately it had a lock and appeared to be a lock was sufficient to convince him to surrender. Since I heard his step down the steps and out the front entryway, I rushed to the window to see what direction the man was going. However, he was at that point gone. Quite some time ago, my girlfriend and I were searching for a private spot to be distant from everyone else. Since our folks were dependably home, there was an empty house on the corner of our square that hadn't been possessed for a long time. The indirect access was generally left open. I would know because my companions and I had been in there before we went in through the back. Yet before we might get higher up, there was a thump at the front entryway. We took a gander at one another with stress, assuming that somebody had found us sneaking in. She looked through the window, yet there was no one on the stoop. She ensured that the entryway was locked before turning around to me. I guaranteed her were only a few children playing ding-dong ditch. We made it just mostly up the steps before the wild-eyed thumping on the entryway returned. She checked the window once more. The yard was as yet void. She opened the entryway this time. I actually couldn't see anybody. I needed to look intense to intrigue her, so I ventured outside and hollered at the tricksters to attempt it. Once more I shut the entryway and held up behind it, hands on the door handle, prepared to toss the entryway open. I just sat tight there for basically a minute. I was going to simply disregard. It was when I heard the blood coagulating shout of my better half. He went to see what she was shouting at, and I shouted, too scarcely in obscurity, "We can see the outline of a tremendous humanoid, the figure gradually its way down to make the steps. It was moving in a floating, like the movement We ran past it was simply in arms, reach and went out how we came. We ran as far as possible back to my home, both of us exhausted. We realized it proved unable, have been an old individual. It must be at least 7 feet tall. No one was expected to be residing in that house. However, I even asked a companion living across the road from the house and he said it had been empty for quite a long time. The spooky way the figure moved made everything the additional upsetting. We both consented to stay silent about this story. I still, every so often, has a bad dream or awful considerations about that evening.